Hello and welcome to A Sunny Book Nook. My name is Sunny and today I'm going to be bringing to you my June and July wrap up. I read like 13 books in the past couple months, which is not that much for me, to be honest. And honestly, it's very few books for me, to be honest. So, also, if you can hear the cicadas outside, it's because it's summer in St. Louis. That's how it is. Whatever. Anyways, I've just been traveling so much for the past 6 weeks. So, while traveling, I haven't been reading as much, and for the same reason, I haven't been filming and putting out as many videos. So, yeah, that's why we're just catching up today, and I'm just giving you the books that giving you my reviews of the books that I read in the past 2 months in which I have been traveling and out of town. So, the first book that I finished in June, I actually talked about in my most recent wrap up that's up. So, yeah, it was Y/N by Esther Gee, so I already talked about that in that video. So, the next book that I read and finished in June was, also I'm looking at my iPad over here, it's set up, which is why I'm looking in this direction. Anyways, so the next book that I read was Killing Me by Michelle Gagnon. This book I rated 4.5 stars because I had so much fun with this. I think that there has been this uptick in fun, sort of feminist or women-centered thriller stories, crime mystery stories, especially with the popularity of Finlay Donovan and that series. We're getting a lot more quirky, funny, silly, goofy, yet high stakes type of thriller crime heist type shit in a way that I really fuck with and I really enjoy. And this book I think is very much in that. There's something stuck in my teeth. I think it's because I ate a peach today. Anyways, back in the Sunny Book Nook. I really liked this. I thought it was so much fun. Basically, the premise is that there is this woman at the very beginning of the novel who lives in this college town. She is pretty average. She's studying psychology. She has a roommate who is a very classic sorority girl type. And on the way home one day, she gets kidnapped by the serial killer that's been going about town kidnapping and killing girls. But the thing about him, this guy who kidnaps girls, is that he paints them their naked bodies into a Pokemon. Anyways, so basically she thinks she's about to die, but then, oh no, here comes some woman who then rescues her. So now this woman has rescued her, and our main character actually has some shady history, past dealings situation. So after she gets rescued from this almost dying from a serial killer situation, she is trying to get information from this woman, why did you save me? What are you doing? Who are you? But she's being very tight-lipped about it. Anyway, she gets back to her apartment, and then the FBI show up at her door, and she's like, okay, I'm scared. I need to get out of town. So she goes to Las Vegas and hangs out at this motel that's run by this very retro, vintage aesthetic woman who's very, sweet and cute. And there seem to be some murders happening there as well. And the woman who rescued her is still somehow involved. She keeps on getting texts from her or something like that. Basically, shit goes down, and it was a really wild romp. It was so fun and funny. Our main character's voice and narration was really strong throughout. I really liked it, and I thought that the way that it all played out and the way that it played with psychology of these main characters was fun. It was twisty. It was turny, and there was a lesbian, hooker, prostitute, drug addict plot part of the story, which I enjoyed. So yeah, it kind of reminded me of the TV show Poker Face by Ryan Johnson and Natasha Lyonne, which I really love that TV show. It's so great. It's kind of like that, but if it was lesbian, which is what I wrote in my Goodreads review. So, yeah. Anyways, really enjoyed this one. And then the next book that I read was also, my wrist cracks in like every video. I don't know why. Like, it's just, that's my joints. They just love to do that. Anyways, Exalted by Anna Dorn. I already talked about this in, I think, my mid-year book freakout tag, and yeah, I talked about this one in that video. But I really like this book. I rated it 5 stars because it was crazy. Like, it was insane. It was the just so deeply mentally ill nature of these main characters just truly resonated with me on a level that was like, wow. Because we are following these 2 women, one of whom is this, like, I think early or like late 20 something, maybe early 30s woman, failing actor in LA. She is living in her apartment and she's a mess. She's a fucking mess. And she makes her living, like, she's barely getting by at this point, but through this really massive astrology meme account. So it's called Exalted, obviously. So she has this astrology meme account and it's super popular. She makes astrology memes and then she charges people for readings and she like writes articles, and that's how, you know, she gets by. But business is kind of slowing and it's unfortunate. But basically one day she reads this guy's chart and she's like, holy shit, this guy's placements are all exalted. Like they're all in the right positions, are all in the best positions. And so she just like becomes obsessed with this random ass guy and starts low-key stalking him. Then we get the perspective of this like 40-something-year-old lesbian, this woman who has an adult son, and she lives in Riverside, California, and she is like a chain smoker who works at a restaurant. She's had to pick up her waitressing job again because her rich girlfriend dumped her, and basically she's very crazy, okay? She definitely has, like, undiagnosed BPD or something, because every time she keeps on getting into these relationships and then getting broken up with because she is so crazy. Her name's Dawn, because she's so crazy, and her girlfriends will, like, break up with her over text because they're like, I'm scared of you, like, you are scary. So, yeah, Dawn is a scary-ass bitch, and Dawn is crazy and has a drinking problem, and she has this like strange relationship with her son in which like she really wants him to have a close relationship with her, and she wants to be like a good mother to him. I think she had him when she was pretty young, like probably a teenager, but she can feel and see his distance from her. But she is really into the Exalted Instagram account, and she keeps up with it. But we basically see as their lives cross paths in a way that is very interesting and unfortunate and hilarious and just ridiculous, but also entertaining in the way that, like, you're watching, like, a car crash happen. But I found this, like, as a women's literary fiction type of novel, just pretty excellent and very compelling, honestly. I really liked it. So that's why I rated it 5 stars, and I found it really memorable. I found the writing very good in how it portrayed these unlikable female main characters for who they were, and for these people feeling so like real, and also like social media and astrology being discussed in the way that it is in this novel was so refreshing to me. And so I think well done in a way that I don't really see that often in a lot of contemporary novels, I suppose. And yeah, I mean, I'm really into astrology. You should guess in the comments what you think my astrological sign is, actually. But I'm interested to see what you guys think. But yeah, I mean, I think that this was pretty good. Yeah, Dawn is a Leo, and our other main character, forgetting her name to be honest, she is a Scorpio and a Gemini moon, I think. But yeah, I I liked this a lot. The next book that I read was Open Throat by Henry Hoke, which I rated like 4 stars, 4.5 stars. I like this book a lot as well, but it was very short, so it wasn't that memorable. And it basically follows this mountain lion, this like big cat that is in Southern California, and I think like is just in the mountains and is witnessing, we're in like this cat's point of view, so we're seeing his perspective on like humans and how they interact with nature in the mountains that he lives in. And then basically this like girl takes him in to her house and they become like friends, but because we're in his point of view, like we know the cat point of view and we know his thoughts and reflections, and he has these like really interesting thoughts of like, well, what is this? What is thunder? What is like, because he doesn't know the English words to describe things and feelings and the natural environment that he experiences as like a mountain lion. So I thought that was really sweet and compelling and very adorable, honestly. But also like this is like a ferocious mountain lion, and he also has the thoughts of like, oh, and I could kill and eat this human being if I wanted to. I thought that it was pretty solid, but again, a very short book, so not necessarily that memorable, but well written for like what it was. And then the next book that I read was The Appointment by Katharina Volkmer. And I read this book while I was in Germany, which I thought was really funny because our main character talks about being from Germany and being German a lot. God. So I read this book 2 stars. I thought that it was kind of miserable. It was another short book, like a novella situation. Like, it's written from the perspective of someone who is at a therapy appointment or in a psychologist's office. So her first person narration is just like a stream of consciousness, like what she's saying out loud in her therapy appointment with this guy. And her psychologist is Jewish and she is German and not Jewish, and she talks a lot about like, I think she talks about like her fantasy of like fucking Hitler or something like that. I don't know, just weird shit. And it was just like this like psychological character study that because it was like this monologue of just her at this appointment, it became this third person point of view thing where we are watching her, we as readers are hearing her talk at length about her experiences, her guilt, her relationship to gender, essentially. I think one of the big things is that she feels a lot of gender dysphoria. Am I using the right pronouns? I think the reason why I'm saying she, her, is because I listened to the audiobook and the narrator was a woman, but I think our main character is trans and is in a later period of their life, or is probably like middle age or something like that, and they're kind of trying to, towards the end of the book, I think they kind of start to unpack like how they felt about their body growing up, like what it means to like be a girl, be a woman, like, and then how they feel about it, their neutralness or their neutrality versus their disgust for it, and also their relationship to like their husband and people in their life. And I thought that it was just like, wow, therapy cannot fix some of you bitches in a very serious way. And that was my review on Goodreads as well. Like, I just found this book, I didn't think it didn't really bring me anything. It didn't really offer me anything that I just didn't find it like compelling, I guess, or like interesting or original in a way that I don't know. I didn't have any expectations really going into it. I think I saw it categorized under like transgender literature or something like that, and I was like, oh, okay, it's short, like I'll listen to this. when I'm walking around in this new city that I've not been to before. And then I have weird dreams about Hitler's mustache. And I'm like, what? Like, it's just, I don't know. Not for me, I guess. But yeah, the next book that I finished in the month of June was Peach Pit, edited by Molly Ewan and Christelle Buckley. This book is beat the fuck up because I brought it with me everywhere and I read it a lot of places, in the pool and like on the plane and whatever. But yeah, this is an advanced reader copy because it doesn't come out till September. Yeah, and I think that this was very excellent. I think I rated it like 4.5 stars, 5 stars. It is a short story collection, obviously, and Molly actually sent this arc to me, so thank you so much, Molly. And I really appreciate her support on my videos, and I really love her Instagram account. So basically, this is a collection of like unsavory women, like unhinged female main characters is the theme of this collection, and it, I think, does that quite well. It has a lot of authors that I really, really love. Like, the last short story is by Lauren Groff. It's called Amaranth. I love that one. There is a Chantal V. Johnson short story in here that is kind of like speculative and sci-fi based that I wasn't really expecting, because one of my favorite books of the year was Post Traumatic by Chantal V. Johnson, which was kind of auto-fictional and just like realistic literary fiction. So that was really cool. I mean, there's a Ming Chang short story in here that was very Ming Chang, of course. There's a short story in here about a medical school, or like working in a hospital, that was really interesting. I thought that so many of these short stories were very compelling and interesting, some more so than others, of course, but yeah, a really really solid anthology of authors that are all excellent writers. So really like this. The next book that I read in the month of, actually, these are now going to be books that I read in July. So I listened to the book Ripe by Sarah Rose Etter on the Libro FM ALC influencer program. And I was actually listening to this book when I was in San Francisco, or partially when I was in there, which was interesting because this book is very much about living and being in San Francisco, in that world. It's about this woman who works in the tech industry as like a marketing person for this company, this startup that's run by this like Russian lady, like the fucking military, and it is very intense. Like, she has just emotionally just incredibly draining. Of course, the actual workday and how she's expected to show up is just so much, and we see her day in, day out. And then at the same time, she's dating this chef who's in like an open relationship, so he has a long-term girlfriend, so she's essentially like an acknowledged side piece. And we see her as she has this sort of metaphor in her mind of the black hole, and that being this all-consuming like depression and mental illness that just follows her around. I think that she also gets, I mean, is this a spoiler? She gets pregnant in the book, and she like pursues an abortion. It's very heavy, it's very dark, it's really, like, it's a lot, honestly, but it's quite, I don't know, the writing is solid, and I think it has that heavy literary quality to it that works for this type of novel. And yeah, I mean, there were a lot of like tangents about like the black hole and other thoughts that she has about like the universe at large and like how she fits into it. And she thinks about like going home and like her parents and her relationship to her family and her parents' relationship to each other growing up, and their relationship to like money and finance and supporting yourself and living in this apartment that you can't even really be in because you're always at work. And like, I don't know, I think it was interesting. She has these interactions with the homeless man who lives in the street right outside her apartment, that's very like antagonistic pretty regularly, and there's a lot of like scenes that describe the unhoused people in San Francisco and how they like interact with her, how she witnesses them interacting. Her and her friends like at dinner or over drinks, like talking about their jobs and talking about their lives and all this stuff. And it's like we see how unhappy and removed she is from her place of like relative privilege, but I don't know if it even necessarily interrogated that relationship to like privilege and like displacement and the housing crisis and employment and all these things that are facing a city like San Francisco in a way that, I mean, it really shows that, and it really depicts it in a very head-on way, but I don't know if it like tackles it thematically necessarily. I don't know. If you've read this book, let me know what you think. But yeah, I rated it 3 stars. I thought it was solid, but and like memorable, but not, I didn't really like necessarily deliver on everything that I wanted or that I think it set out to, at least for me as a reader. So the next book that I read was Candy Hearts by Tommy Siegel, which I rated 3 stars. It's basically like a picture book, like a little comic of just 2 candy hearts or multiple candy hearts, and each candy heart is like the inner thoughts of what is happening. And the 2 different candy hearts are like representing people in a date or people in a relationship or people, you know. And I thought it was really cute and funny and sweet. And yeah, I really liked it. I took some screenshots that I thought were fun and applicable and interesting, and that made me giggle. So yeah, I mean, this was cute and quick. The next book that I read was Anne of Green Gables, a graphic novel written by Mariah Marsden. And I rated this 5 stars, okay, because Anne of Green Gables was a childhood favorite of mine in like a very serious way. I read like all of the books in the series when I was in like middle school. I loved Anne so much, and I think that this graphic novel adaptation did it justice very well, and it was a really gorgeous illustration in depicting Anne's story, and I think it, you know, it stuck and rang true to the original story, hitting all the major like beats while also not feeling too drawn out or unnecessary or blocks of text heavy. So yeah, I cried a few times reading this. It's just a thing that will always draw on my fucking heartstrings. Like, this is a children's classic that it's gotten the adaptations that it has because it is just good. So yeah, Anne of Green Gables, the graphic novel, excellent, really enjoyed it. Next book that I read was Out There by Kate Folk, which I rated 4 stars. I think I have maybe unpopular opinion or take on this book, I guess, because I mean, I just binge watch a lot of Gabby Reed's videos, to be honest, and it seemed like she didn't like a lot of the short stories that I found the most interesting. I think that this collection is not necessarily uneven, but just the length of the stories for me kind of reflected back to me how memorable I've know that they were going to be and how much I was going to like them. I think the shorter the stories, the less I was going to really vibe with it, and the longer they were, I really enjoyed. I think like that's where Kate Folk thrives for me personally. I think that the stories that were most memorable for me were The Bone Ward, which Gabby said that she DNF'd and like skipped completely because of the body horror of it all, which that makes sense, but like I found it so compelling. I found the ending of that short story so, oh god, because The Bone Ward as a story is about these people who like whose bones like melt into their whole bodies, just like melt, and so they're all in like this secret really tiny hospital ward called the Bone Ward, and there's one woman and there's like 5-10 of these men, and then this other woman who has this bone disease gets introduced to the dynamic and to the group and like what happens then, because our main character has this like ongoing romance with this guy in the ward, and she is well enough to leave the ward, but she's not because she wants to maintain her romance with this guy. So we see how this addition of another woman into this group affects the whole group dynamic, and then we see the consequences of that and the fallout in a way that's just like really, really interesting, at least to me. And I thought that being in the perspective of this female main character and her jealousies and petty resentments and her perception of like how what was happening and her actions and behaviors and such was just, it was like, wow. Unlikable female main characters for real. So yeah, and I did like, there were two interconnecting short stories in here about these blots, which were like these robots who, it was the first short story and then the last short story. Big Sur was the last short story, and then the first short story was the titular one out there. And blots are like these robots who look like men and who are like the ideal boyfriend, essentially. And they can trick women into dating them, and then they'll like take them to Big Sur because there's no service, and then steal like all of their data and information. So we see in the first short story this woman going on dates but trying to make sure that the guy that she's dating is not a blot. And then the last short story is this woman like finding out that the guy that she's dating is a blot. And we see these very different perspectives in a way that is just like pretty interesting, but they weren't the most compelling for me, for sure, because I think that A Scale Model of Goal Point was a short story that I listened to twice because it was so compelling to me. Like, basically, it's about this woman who is, I think, like an artist or a sculptor or something like that. Yes, she's a sculptor and an artist, and she's married this kind of like wealthier man, and she hasn't worked in a while, and she like won this like online ticket lottery thing to go to Goal Point, which is this fictional sort of like island slash city that is kind of like Las Vegas, except worse, like even more hedonistic, even more exploitative labor practices, even like truly horrific labor practices and exploitation happening. And so when she goes, there's a bunch of strikes happening, there's like uprisings happening, and then the whole city gets basically shut down. And so because of everyone is rioting, all the workers are rioting, and when that happens, she's in a restaurant at like the top of a tower, and shit just goes down and it's crazy. And then we see her build this model of Goal Point of the city as a way to cope when like all the people who are in the restaurant, like they're running low on water, there's people who are barricading the door, there's like people trying to get in, like it's crazy. So I don't know, I really liked that story a lot, and I thought that I thought that it was really interesting, and I really liked it. It was really horrific, of course, very apocalyptic, but yeah, I mean, I think that there's also this short story called like Moist House, and that was interesting as well. Again, like I just liked the longer short stories because I felt that those were less like they didn't really hit me with a little bit of a concept and a vibe with a twist at the end. They felt more like an actual like story with characters that felt like real, and in a world that felt like fleshed out, and like it was saying something about our reality and reflecting that. So yeah, I liked it a lot, and I don't know if it's like a new favorite of all time, but I rated it 4 stars, so yeah. The next book that I read in July was Sea Change by Gina Chung, and I rated this book 4 stars. It is literary fiction, and it's about this Korean American first generation woman whose parents are immigrants, and she works in an aquarium, and she has a favorite creature at the aquarium, which is Dolores, the giant Pacific octopus. And Dolores and her have like a special relationship because Dolores was actually discovered and brought back from the Bering Vortex, which is a fictional place in the ocean, brought back to this aquarium by her father, who was a marine biologist. But on one of his research missions to the Bering Vortex, her father went missing when she was in high school. So basically, we see this, we're in the perspective of this young woman as she is trying to deal with, like, she's like 30 now. She's dealing with the trauma and coping with the reality of her father being gone for so long and having disappeared for so long, and then the tense and difficult relationship with her mother in that way. And then also, like, she's dealing with the aftermath of a breakup as well, because her long-term boyfriend left to go to prepare for like a mission to Mars, like this colonizing mission for Mars. So he's like in Arizona doing the body training and whatnot for that. Like, he won the like lottery selection pick like process for that, and so she was just like left behind in New Jersey. And then her best friend, her childhood best friend, who now as an adult, she also works at the aquarium. She is getting married, and like, because the breakup and then the wedding happens sort of simultaneously, they're having this difficulty within their relationship. And also Dolores is getting sold to a buyer, and Dolores is like one of the last ties that our main character feels like she has to her father. And so it's just like a very like sad book in a lot of ways, but it's also hopeful and emotional and redemptive, and is about the ties that like bind us to a community and to people who love us and people that we've lost and people who are just in our lives, in like what it means to, you know, like exist as a young person, as a person in our contemporary world, and specifically from like an Asian American woman's perspective. That is so interesting. We get so many different like flashbacks to her childhood and to the early parts of her relationship with her ex-boyfriend, like with her relationship to her parents when she was a kid, her relationship to her best friend when she was a teenager. It was really interesting. I really liked it, and I rated it 4 stars. The next book that I read in July, the second to last book, was another Libro FM ALC influencer program book, and that was How to Stay Productive When the World is Ending. Productivity, Burnout, and Why Everyone Needs to Relax More Except You by Reductress. If you don't know, Reductress is like an online magazine that's basically like the Feminist The Onion, essentially. It's like a satire, humor blog. There's like a compilation of like writers and editors who helped create this book, and it's pretty funny. Like, I enjoyed it, and I think that a physical book has illustrations and stuff. I didn't see it because obviously I listened to it via the Libro FM program. So yeah, I mean, I thought it was solid, and I think that the way that it engages with like the contemporary workplace and like social media and of course like productivity and how to balance all of these things and how to like be a person, and talking about all of this in like a really funny way was very relatable in a way that wasn't necessarily trying too hard, because it was like obviously coming from a place of these are the experiences that we as also 20-something, 30-something writers and people who are creating this book for you are experiencing as well, and that is crazy. Like, yeah, I mean, I thought that it was fun and funny, and like it was satire in a way that was very much like, yeah, this is like a long form Reductress, like this is like a compilation of like Reductress articles kind of, but all centered around the theme of like work and productivity and like self-care, like, and how funny it can be, and how the mishaps that can happen when you try to attempt any of these things, essentially. The last book that I read in July was The Late Americans by Brandon Taylor, which is his third book. I have read all of them now, which is interesting. I rated this book 4 stars, or 3.5 stars. I thought it was pretty solid. I feel like it almost is a midpoint between his first novel and his second book, because the second book, I have both of them here, I think, Real Life and Filthy Animals. This is about like a graduate school gay black man in like Alabama or something, or who's from Alabama, and he's like doing a biochemistry PhD situation. And this one is a short story collection following a bunch of different people, including like children of like Russian immigrants and ballet dancers. And yeah, so I think that The Late Americans sort of combines those two, because we get a graduate school perspective because it's set in Iowa in this college town, and we follow some of these poetry MFA people, and we follow some of the dancers at the Iowa college, people who are in that dance program. We also see some like townies, and we see the different relationships that play out between people, and the different class backgrounds and race backgrounds and backgrounds in art and literature and their pursuits in them from all of these characters, that I found very compelling and like well done in a way that was like these characters feel like almost real. And we got a pretty wide span, and we revisited certain characters, and we revisited people who felt interesting in their like it felt very ordinary but also real in how like some people, there are some couples that were just like kept on getting back together and breaking up and whatnot, and there's some people who are just like, the sole black dancer in the whole cohort, and like how she has to deal with so much bullshit, or this man who works at the meatpacking factory, or this guy who's in the poetry class or in the poetry MFA program who just doesn't feel like he is having the same experience as these other people in his cohort who feel very like facetious almost. So yeah, I mean, I thought it was like this range of character studies and the ways that they like interact with each other in a way that was pretty solid, pretty good. I liked it. Very Brandon Taylor, of course. So I rated this book 3.5 stars, I think I said. Maybe like 4 stars even. But yeah. So those are all of the books that I read in June and July. Let me know what you thought of any of these books, if you've read them or if you would like to read any of them. Please like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you in my next video, hopefully. Okay, bye!